A school trustee in Prince Edward Island has just resigned after being a voice for parents who are concerned about gender ideology in school. Today, we meet with her to find out why.
I think, unfortunately, the mainstream media tends to create this, we against them narrative. And it isn't, because I think, people that I spoke to, parents, we're concerned for all children. That's why I got into this. I wasn't a one issue candidate. There's lots of things that public, trustees can address within the school system. And it's hard to even, speak to student achievement when you have this big hurdle of all this indoctrination that's going on in schools.
Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, where we bring you the other side of the story, which means we've covered many stories on how the push for radical gender ideology in school is confusing some children, and how it can also lead to a fight for parental rights as the state takes a child down a path of affirm all things trans behind a parent's back. We even have a special website. It's called stopclassroomgrooming.com, where you can catch up on reports like that and take action by signing our petition there. And today, I add another report to that roster. Patty Van Diepen has worked as a nurse in PEI for over 30 years and more recently served as a school trustee in Morel, Surrey Zone 7. That is until she recently resigned from her position after feeling like being a voice for the parents who had concerns about PEI's gender identity guidelines was not only falling on deaf ears, but that the position itself wouldn't permit her to fully address parents' valid concerns regarding the curriculums or directives put in place by PEI's government. PEI's transgender network is all but celebrating Van Diepen's resignation. According to the CBC article here, the network's executive director, Lucky Fusca, says Van Diepen's resignation comes as a relief to the transgender network. She then proceeds to accuse Van Diepen of only being frustrated during her time as a trustee for being unable to spread anti-trans propaganda in a system that very much impacts very vulnerable people such as trans and LGBTQ youth. We've heard this before, right? Every single time a parent has a valid concern about gender ideology in school. But was it anti-trans propaganda that Van Diepen was trying to convey for parents in meetings? And is this the end to Van Diepen's fight in this matter? Here's her side of this story.
All right, Patty Van Diepen, thanks so much for joining us on Rebel News.
Thanks for having me, Drea.
Now, you won pretty overwhelmingly to become a trustee. You've resigned now. We're going to get into the reasons why, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what that win was like?
Oh, it was very humbling, and especially given the light that the PEI Transgender Network on PEI had highlighted an article from the previous year that I had written when the PEI government had put out for a public consult process, looking for input from the public to see about implementing these guidelines into our public schools. And I had some concerns with that as a parent. That was brought to the forefront when I ran as a candidate, and the PEI Transgender Network didn't view that very kindly and thought that I should be disqualified on that article that I had written.
But you didn't get disqualified. You won. Tell us a little bit about how much you won by.
Well, that was very humbling, actually. I had took the opportunity. We could go to Election PEI when they were doing the count, and this was a first-time experience for me. So I went, and when the votes started rolling in, and I was winning by an overwhelming majority, I was very humbled and very grateful to the constituents of Zone 7 for putting their faith in me that I could be their voice representing the parents and children for District 7. The Gender Diversity Guidelines is a 30-page document that the public school branch here on PEI put out as they said it was a human rights issue. Gender identity and gender expression became recently protected rights under the Canada Charter of Rights. And some of the concerns that I had penned in that article, and certainly what I heard from parents, they were concerned about the lack of apparent rigorous evaluation of these guidelines The partners that helped develop these guidelines were all sort of like narrow interest focus groups, like the PEI Transgender Network, Peers Alliance. There was no medical consultation, no pediatricians, no psychologists to kind of speak to the impact of these guidelines. And it's a 30-page document, so some of the best practices, it was totally new for Prince Edward Island. They wanted to limit gender language. There was the whole bathroom issue of biological males being permitted to go into biological female bathrooms and vice versa. The same with sports teams. And I think the thing that kind of stuck out to me at the time back in 2021 was that it embedded in the document is if a child just simply self-declares that they feel that they have an issue with their gender identity that they want to explore and say that they feel that their parents might not understand, that whole process can be kept from parents, from the schools concerning their minor children, with social transitioning and counseling efforts.
Well, that's the same out here in British Columbia. We have that same thing happening in our schools. Many parents are upset about it. Their child is essentially living a separate life. Some are finding out later on through the school yearbook, for example. So parents came to you and they asked you to start voicing their opinions. And then how was that going during the meetings?
Well, the PEI Education Act has within it legislation that says that parents are recognized as the primary decision makers for their children in regards to their education. So I felt that as a trustee, there would be some accountability that I could tap into on parents' behalf. But it quickly became apparent that was not to be the case. We had some governance training. Like I said, we haven't had elected boards here for over 14 years. And when they defined the roles and responsibilities of the different educational interest groups, like the Department of Education, the public school branch, and us as trustees, I was limited as to what I could say about anything curriculum, or in this case, the guidelines are a ministerial directive. So they're parallel to a curriculum as far as educators are concerned. They're bound by these things that come from the Department of Education. And as a trustee, I was very limited in doing that. And I had attempted a few times to bring up some of our policies that I could speak to, respectful, caring, and safe environments. I felt that had to be for every child, not just the children that this guidelines were aiming to speak to. And probably would be viewed as disruptive by the board. And after much consideration, I felt like I was in a real ethical dilemma. These parents were counting on me to be their voice. I wanted to represent them fully. I wasn't able to do that. And so I felt that if I stayed a part of that board, that it might demonstrate my complacency with what was going on within the public school system. And that was something that I was not interested in.
Mm-hmm. Now, I imagine a lot of the people who voted you in were really rooting for you in this area. What message do you have to say to some of them who are maybe disheartened with your decision to resign?
Well, I think that what we need now is to really mobilize the people of Prince Edward Island. They are going to have to speak on their own behalf. They're going to have to challenge government with their concerns. I would encourage them to continue to write the Deputy Minister and the Minister of Education with concerns they had. It has to come from them now. And one of the puzzling things, our board chair, when this story broke just a few days ago and they were interviewed, they had made the comment that myself hearing from 5 parents wasn't representative of perhaps the 500 voices that might be in my district, and that really puzzled me because I've heard from parents provincially, but I know even just in my end of the island, I know of at least 2 parent groups who reached out to their local MLA to express their concerns. Mm-hmm. There is currently been made aware of a petition that is circulating Prince Edward Island, asking for the complete removal of the gender diversity guidelines from our schools. Mm-hmm. And we have a population here of around 170,000, and I heard there's about 1,000 names on that petition. There had been a resolution attempted by one of the local home and schools, again, from parents wanting to address these needs. Unfortunately, the resolution was on a technicality, and it wasn't able to be presented to the annual general PEI Home and School Federation meeting where they speak about these resolutions. And I know parents have reached out to the public school branch, so I'm not really sure where that comment was coming from, and I don't know if it's really reflective of the actual situation here in Prince Edward Island as to the degree of concern by parents. My children are almost done of the public school system, so it wasn't being a champion for my own children. It was recognizing, this big crevice here and the needs, and not only for students who feel that they're not impacted by the gender diversity issues, but for also the children who these guidelines were aimed to protect. I mean, again, I think the lack of, medical contribution there, and as far as the government goes, I think there was a inherent feeling among parents that there's a duty to inform and to communicate. And when we had this public consultation process, the public has yet to receive any feedback from what that actually, what did it reveal? How many people, put in concerns, or, were people very supportive or non-supportive? We've had zero feedback. And again, I think parents, one of the biggest hurdles is there are a lot of parents who are not even aware these gender diversity guidelines only came into effect in December of 2021. So it's really just been a little over a year. And I think parents are just starting to see the impact of that now. But again, I think unfortunately, the mainstream media tends to create this, we against them narrative. And it isn't, because I think, people that I spoke to, parents, we're concerned for all children. That's why I got into this. I wasn't a one issue candidate. There's lots of things that public, trustees can addressed within the school system. And it's hard to even, speak to student achievement when you have this big hurdle of all this indoctrination that's going on in schools. But also, putting on my healthcare hat again, we know from studies and different things that a lot of these children who go down the road of these, struggles with gender dysphoria have an underlying other health issues like anxiety, depression, ADD. There's 30% people are on the autism spectrum, like they're children in need, and this has to be addressed for sure. I'm still here as a parent advocate, as a private citizen. I was concerned before I became a trustee, and I'm still here. I'm going to remain here in place and hopefully be able to guide my short time as a trustee. I recognize that we have to lobby the government. That's where the power is. That's where the decisions are. And that's where parents have to direct their concerns.
Well, thank you so much for being on Rebel News to share your side of this story, which I know many parents are probably thankful for the fight that you did do and are looking forward to where you're taking it next. Thanks for being on Rebel News.
Thank you for this opportunity, Drea. This is great. Thank you.
At Rebel News, we fearlessly bring you the other side of the story so you can know the truth about things like gender ideology in school. If you appreciate the work that we do and even want to take action, go to stopclassroomgrooming.com. Sign and share the petition there, and you can donate to support our journalism while you're on that site. We appreciate your support.